First, Donald Trump is not a paragon of personal moral virtue. But on the other hand, no politician in my lifetime, in fact, I would say of the last 70 years, has done a more important job of going after the deep state.
So you mentioned something that's like bouncing around a lot on Twitter over the last couple of months, that a certain set of conservatives think that it really is to protect virtue or a certain sense of morality, something like that. What would you say to those guys when they say, well, if we don't protect virtue, now, of course, now that becomes an amorphous term depending on how they see virtue, but if we don't defend virtue or morality, which they usually tie very close to religion, that then individual rights ultimately will be trampled upon anyway, that you sort of need that as a precursor.
Yeah. When did government ever make men moral? Right? You need freedom to be moral. The best inculcator, in my view, of virtue, and believe me, there is no greater proponent of the importance and necessity of moral virtue in society than myself. I mean, in my view, you to have a free society, you have to have a nation of moral men and women. You cannot have a nation made up of moral reprobates. That goes without saying. So I stand. No man stands ahead.
Do you think we sometimes need them? Do you think we sometimes need some morally corrupt people? So we've made it somehow 40 minutes without mentioning the T word. But in many ways, Trump, to me, is something like that. Like, this is obviously no great moral, virtuous person, but in many ways, he was the hammer that we needed to sort of shake up the system, to break a lot of bad things that had been sort of calcified. But didn't do it out of, no one's looking, I don't even think the biggest MAGA supporter is looking at Trump thinking, oh, this is the greatest moral man on earth, but in a weird way, he was the necessary tool. Do you think that, is that
Sure.
possible to bridge that divide?
Well, sure. I mean, I do think it is it's a fact. Two facts that you've mentioned. First, Donald Trump is not a paragon of personal moral virtue. But on the other hand, no politician in my lifetime, in fact, I would say of the last 70 years, has done a more important job of going after the deep state. The deep state is something I think that is real. And the deep state also includes the mainstream media. And so Trump has launched a 3.5-year assault on all of the certitudes and platitudes of the deep state, and I do think that's been an extraordinarily important development in American political life.
So do you sort of separate that from morality in a traditional sense, or is that a type of morality actually?
Well, I mean, it's a type of morality if it's directed at breaking down tyrannical power, right? So, sure, the defenders of freedom, and I'm not suggesting that Trump is necessarily a defender of freedom, because he's certainly passed, I think, a lot of laws that have been antithetical to freedom, but in the macro picture, he's done many things, reducing taxes, massively cutting regulations, but most importantly, it's identity. I would say the single most important thing that he has done is literally just simply to have identified the deep state, right, and then to be attacking it on a daily basis, which, as I've said, includes the media. That itself has been, one might say, a kind of revolutionary act.
Yeah, well, it feels like we're kind of in one right now. So revolution, since you're talking about revolutionary acts, that's the fourth one that they found to be self-evident. That's probably the scariest one for most people, and especially in a weird time like this. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I think the most important thing to remember, Dave, is that America is a revolutionary nation. And what I mean by that is we were founded by a revolution. We created a new nation de novo, out of nothing, on a tabula rasa. But built into the principles of the Declaration is the idea that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends or purposes, which is the protection of rights, the Declaration says that the people have the right to alter or abolish that government, right? And that truth, and it was meant to be a truth, not a truth specific to 1776, but a universal, permanent truth. So it applied in 1840, it applied in 1940, and it will apply again in 2040. America is a revolutionary nation. However, it's also important to note that in the Declaration of Independence, the first word that appears after the fourth self-evident truth, the revolution truth, is the word prudent. And what that means, the importance of that, is that you can't have some crazy guy living out in the woods of Idaho declaring war on the American government, right? Revolutions are dangerous things, and America's revolutionary founders, they understood that. It's a dangerous thing, and you can't try to overturn your government for, as the Declaration says, light and transient causes, right? So Jefferson never would have said that with the passage of the Stamp Act, that it would be appropriate to overthrow the British government. But according to Jefferson, when you get the Sugar Act in 1764, the Stamp Act in 1765, the Declaratory Act in 66, and then the Townshend Acts in 1767, the Tea Act in 73, and then most importantly, the coercive and prohibitory acts in 1774 and 75, Jefferson says, look, there is clearly, self-evidently, a design, and that's a word that you see in the Declaration and you see it in the revolutionary literature. There is a design on the part of British imperial officials to enslave us, to deny us our freedoms and rights. So if each of those laws had been passed by the British government, separated by 50 years each, there probably would have been no cause for revolution. But when compacted in an 11, or just really it was a 10-year period, Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington even said, look, these are not just passing acts. These are not mistakes on the part of the British Parliament or George III. We can clearly discern a pattern, and that pattern leads in one direction, and that direction is slavery.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about academia instead of nonstop yelling, check out our academia playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.